Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. I am Fariba and I'm just about to watch the fourth episode of Andor. I know I haven't dropped my episode 3 reaction for it, but just to kind of give you an idea of what happened, after watching episode 3, I literally was hooked. The way that it ended in one of the most chilling way possible, I literally knew that I was going to stay tuned to this series. One of the things I really appreciate about it is the fact that it is very different. The atmosphere is very, very different. It's not like other Star Wars series where it's like the epic Western opera type, where you have a lot of action and all that. This is a very gritty, a lot more mature Star Wars story that we have. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, this is about Cassian Andor, and we're learning kind of how he evolves through everything that, he's gone through, especially because, as we learned from the first 3 episodes, he has a bit more of a complicated past, one where, it is kind of marked by colonization and the fact that he did come from like a more of a tribal planet, and a lot of that kind of being incorporated into that story. And now, again, we don't really know where else the story is going to go off of. We did hear about the one part where he's looking for his sister, and we don't know if that's going to be a big part of it or the big part's going to be him joining the Rebel Alliance. There's a lot of questions in terms of that, but again, we're going to see where this series goes, because we do have another season coming forth, and that's going to actually conclude the series. So looks like we're going to have more of Andor, at least beyond this season. But having seen what we already saw, right, I am just completely hooked by this whole show. I love the gritty atmosphere. I love the fact that this isn't like the other Star Wars stories where we've seen the issues of trying to do so much in terms of fan service and trying to use that and then having this very inconsistent storyline. That's not something that I've seen with Andor so far. The show is very, very centered on Cassian Andor's story, right? And because of that, this is a story-driven type of show where the story is the star, not the fan service, not who's going to show up. It's the story. And I really appreciate the fact that this is the approach that the show is going for, and that for at least this time around, we're actually getting a show where we're going to have a consistent storyline, hopefully. Again, it's really too soon to say anything where how Andor is going to rank amongst the Star Wars shows that we have seen so far, or even just in general of the whole Star Wars universe. But even that being said, I'm very optimistic about this series, so I'm super stoked. One thing I will mention is that you're probably going to hear a lot of rustling outside, and that is because there's a guy named Hurricane Ian who is kind of zooming through the Gulf Coast. I'm not going to say where exactly I am in Florida, but I am a bit more in the safer zone, so it shouldn't affect me too much. But that being said, there is going to be a lot of heavy rain outside. There might be a lot of tree bustling outside. So just kind of giving a heads up, if you do hear a lot of, outside noise that doesn't seem, out of the order, everything that seems out of the ordinary, it's because there's kind of a storm that we're dealing with. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started with episode 4 of Andor.
Do as I say. Calculations complete. What's all that?
That depends.
I haven't agreed to do anything but save my skin.
Gorilla.
Partisan front. One of them.
Isn't it all the same?
It is to me.
So we agree.
No. I think it's all useless.
This is interesting.
It's better to leave. Better to eat, sleep, do what you want. You don't know me. I fought in Limba when I was 16. 2 years of it. Straight out of prison into the mud. I'm one of 50 that survived. And how did it turn out when we were fighting? Ourselves. So please.
You were on the ground in Limbo for 6 years.
Oh, we're going back to Coruscant. Who remembers those days? Interesting. So they built a bureau in Coruscant.
With the next quarter's detention estimate state, we're here to further security objectives by collecting intelligence, providing useful analysis, and conducting effective covert action, sir.
Very good, Dedra. That is verbatim from the ISB mission statement and wrong. Security is an illusion. You want security? Covert anything. Launch your... Those responsible.
Unknown, sir. I'm heading out immediately after this meeting.
We'll speak before you leave. Yep.
Sir?
Elaborate on these anti-protection requests for traffic to the Adrian sector.
Proactive measures, sir. There's an increase in construction shipments going to Scarif, sir.
Think of a name for yourself. Clem. For the next 5 days, you'll be Clem. Who's that?
We'll be working for him.
I thought you were in charge. I never said that. She's gonna hate this idea to start. She's gonna argue with me. It's a Quati signet. Blue Kyber, Skystone. The ancient world celebrates the uprising against the Rakatan invaders. Don't take less than 50,000.
I heard Kyber Stone, so
No, it will always be worth more to me. I want it back when this is over.
Something I can help you with.
hmm.
We can pile it.
5 months in, just plug in some new person. It'll tear the team.
Isn't that the
That's
wave
not much
from
of a
like
team.
Game of Thrones?
You're vulnerable and you know it. I'm buying you critical redundancy.
Yeah, that's the wave.
What have you
What's her
buying?
name? Faye Marseille?
I'm paying
No.
200,000.
We've been eating roots and sleeping on rocks for this rebellion, and now you've got a mercenary on board.
You're wasting energy. That's what it comes to. You got 3 days. Something resolves, something turns. Someone starts to fall. You step up, you lead, you cancel the mission. You know you understand.
And if he's the problem?
Well, that's the advantage of renting it.
Do with this. Exactly. It took the combined ingredients of idiocy, ineptitude, and total disengagement for this farce to have reached the full apex of incredulous disaster. Seriously. My files are filled with corporate security fiascos, but this takes the prize.
And you, Deputy Inspector Khan.
Proud, are we? Take solace in this. You will not be replaced. You've rung the final
you could
bell
get
of
outside.
corporate independence. As of this morning, the Manana system is under permanent imperial authority.
Oh.
Congratulations on that.
How he's going to have his mind blown off.
This is a long walk.
Hey, hold on.
Get down, come in!
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're wearing a wig. This is interesting. Interesting. Okay.
Barracks.
I have work to do.
an official request made by an officer of my staff.
I suggest you schedule an appointment.
I want the full ferrets report.
It's my sector.
An Imperial Star Party unit was stolen from the Steergard Naval Yard and found at the scene. That gives me jurisdictional access.
You've been here, what, just over a year? You might want to steady the ladder before you start climbing.
I'm not looking for career advice.
You fool.
I know this guy too.
Everyone's dead. While you were sleeping, they came in, slept, everybody. There's two. What do you make of that? We better make sure they know what's going on.
Where's the seventh one?
Gather up. This is Clem. I haven't mentioned him before now because I wasn't sure we could get him here on time. We've had a stroke of luck. He's been able to... And then take a look at his arm.
Well,
The post on the corral is out again. Now, unless you see one of these chasing animals all day, I get out there now. Okay? Let's get to it. We'll work Clem into the program at drill.
He's like, no nonsense here. Oh, so did he get fired? Interesting.
Mother.
What are you staring at? Relation of security.
no, it's got brass. You can feel it, and we can use a hand, but this late in the game.
As opposed to when?
Trust them with our lives.
That's my call to make.
He's committed. I'm feeling that. I want to.
Feel what?
His belief in the cause. When it comes down to it, that's all I need to know.
No.
Well, little they know.
Trust him.
Senator, what a pleasure to see you.
You as well, Newton. Sorry to be so late. I was right when you're leaving, everyone remembers all the things they meant to bother you with.
Many faces, but this is the real thing. It's a unique gift from us, but it's a treasure.
Oh, is he like an antique? He's like an antique guy.
May I show you something?
Whatever.
To expand parents' days beyond fighting the implements, is there anything else that might interest
It
you?
looks like they're trying to find a
I
quiet
have
place,
something
huh?
very special that just came. Come with me. Never think that, but I need to start planning if you no longer come me through for
The
us.
money's there. It's just getting very dangerous to move it around. I can't pool funds the way I used to. I'm watching you now.
Oh.
It's different. They're everywhere. So you spy every day at this end. I visit the bank. They're all new faces. I found someone I think can help me.
Someone who bring you into the circle? No.
I know what I'm asking.
No. We're vulnerable enough. We need funding, not more people to worry about.
Don't lecture me.
Did
I'm
she
not
say
you.
someone?
No one's more at risk than I am. You think I haven't thought this through? I'd be the first one to fall.
Oh, is that the seventh person?
Just like that.
Spilling the works.
What else don't I know about?
This helps us. You were cutting it close. You said it yourself.
3 days out. What were you going to do if I couldn't get me today? Just turn up with an extra face to explain.
I knew you'd come through.
We're not prepped for this. We don't even have enough comms as it is.
We had 2 spares.
That was our backup.
Clem is...
Stannis, lying all from the Vizier's private chamber?
Is that a problem?
You can't be serious. These people hate me. They spend every day trying to undo anything I've touched.
Well, perhaps tomorrow they'll think twice.
Not right now, please.
Take the council. But at your pleasure.
What?
Well played, Perrin. And no, I'm not being series. Don't. I can see how amused they are. Your fun friends just cut off their shipping lanes yesterday. Do you know how many will starve? Perhaps we can laugh about it over the third course.
Perhaps you should have a rest.
If you make me pay attention, I will, and you won't be happy.
Interesting. This is very interesting. We get to see Mothma in a very different light. So
Must everything be boring and sad?
Observation tower, sentry defences, all to protect this runway opening here.
that looks a very familiar place.
The runway descends underground. The flight deck of a single Max 7 Ronin freighter.
Well said, you could pilot. Fly a runner?
The box freighter? Where's the airbase?
From the garrison.
50 clicks, you said. 52. Fine, 52. They'll be on you in minutes.
9 minutes. We've timed it.
Okay. You'll be lucky to make the horizon. It's a suicide line.
Exactly.
That's why they only keep a 40-man regiment in the garrison.
Because they know no one's stupid enough to try it.
No one but us.
These old stones.
To the belt, they swarm the atmosphere, heat up, and explode. From the ground, think beauty. In the sky, there's chaos. We've calculated an escape trajectory.
Let's get to it.
Speak. She's demanding the raw data from the incident on
The
Ferrix.
star path unit that was recovered at the scene has been traced to a theft at an airbase under my jurisdiction.
Spending your valuable time with this issue. There's a high bar for your performance, Lieutenant. Unfair, perhaps, but senseless to ignore and potentially the foundation of a uniquely superior career. You're supposed to be more confident.
You'll eat. You'll let Cinder check the bandage. And you'll have learned all that by morning. I'll take the first watch.
Fourth episode of Andor that we just saw, and again, it's not going into like hi-fi action type of series that we've seen before in Star Wars, right? This is a slow burn series where they're really developing all that dialogue, the character development, kind of just setting the pieces here and there, and just like allowing us to just learn what's going on and immerse into the actual story itself. And yeah, so we don't really get through a lot of things going on, but one of the things that we are seeing is that, of course, just the almost kind of like the turning point. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but just the way that Cassian is developing to become the rebel that we would eventually see in Rogue One. That'll be the more big, important part of his story arc right here, and it seems as if his involvement in this so-called raid that they're going to do in terms of grabbing the weapons might be a part of kind of who we're going to end up seeing in basically Rogue One. So that's going to be an interesting bit right there. And they didn't really go too far into it. They just basically showed that this is who he's going to be involved with, and therefore probably in the next episode we'll see the actual raid itself transpire. So I would imagine that things are going to be really going to get down in the next episode with that being in mind. So I'm very curious to see how it goes from there, especially just to see just how Cassian grows, because I feel like in this sort of series we're going to see just the evolution of Cassian up until, you know, the Cassian that we meet in Rogue One, and just see how he grows, right? And that's going to be, again, the interesting aspect that I hope to see, and just kind of like understand why I can't pronounce his name, Lutheran or Lothran, why he, you know, gave him such a task in such, you know, in this planet, and what does this mean in terms of him becoming a rebel, right? Like, will he make the ultimate sacrifice, or will he, you know, learn to get to become the leader that he would be, or become inspired as a rebel in terms of fighting against the Empire? Like, I wonder what aspects of that they're trying to teach, or what he's trying to show him. And then again, that's gonna be interesting, but just to see probably what we're gonna see by the next episode. Aside from that, we did see Mothma. She's finally arrived in episode 4, and it's, again, I really appreciate the fact that we're not just seeing, you know, lollygagging or anything just like, irrelevant sort of storytelling. What we're seeing is kind of a different side to her, right? We've seen her in many, many, many cases, right? Of course, in The New Hope, she was, heading the whole plan to destroy the Death Star. And then, of course, in Rogue One, we saw even more of that aspect even before trying to execute those plans, and how they actually needed to grab the map itself to, figure out where the weaknesses were. And here we are, we're kind of seeing just a bit more of a younger, more ambitious type of Mothma, who we haven't really seen before, right? Like, we never would have thought that she would have been someone from high council. I mean, yeah, we would have known that she came from like a high council or whatnot, right? Or has high political power, but not in a way that she would be in terms of everybody else. From this episode, you can tell from the looks of it, she isn't like anyone else, right? She actually cares about the people that she governs, and the fact that, one of their so-called allies who doesn't like her decide to block their trade route or something like that, and it's now going to be a consequence for her own people, and she actually genuinely cares for them, whereas her husband doesn't really, budge about it. So it's like we're kind of seeing the inner development of the Mothma that we're going to see again in Rogue One. Basically, everything that we're seeing now is leading up to Rogue One, right? So, and we're, again, just to see a version of Mothma where she kind of feels a bit more vulnerable, hasn't really gotten to the point where she has a really strong voice, but it's going to get there. It's going to be an interesting case as well going forward with the series, and just seeing how each of these characters develop. So it's not just that we're going to see Cassian's story evolve, but we're also going to kind of see some of the big players who were involved in essentially what is like the destruction of the Death Star, or trying to take down the Empire, right? We're seeing the inner lookings of that. So again, a lot of interesting things going on there. And again, the fact that this series really takes its storytelling very seriously, and especially in terms of the character development, is what I'm really appreciating it with this side of the show, because when you compare it again to other Disney Plus series, whether it be the Marvel ones or the Disney ones, we don't necessarily see that character development that we would want, especially one that's so focused and central, like the way that Andor has been conducting some of their stories thus far. So again, this is kind of why I'm really appreciating it. Yes, it is a bit of a slow burn. It is going very slow, but it's not at a point where it's like, okay, the slowness of the show, the slow pacing is making me feel I want to like tap out or anything like that. If anything, it makes me a bit more intrigued to see, okay, why are they doing this? What are they building up to, and what this could mean in terms of the overall arching story. So yeah, and again, we got this gritty atmosphere, the same thing we saw in the last few episodes. Again, I feel like this show has been the most consistent that we've seen in such a long time, and even if the whole general essence of the whole Star Wars series that we've seen in the more recent times, I feel like this has been the most consistent story that I have watched so far. And again, I gotta give props to Tony Gilroy for that. I mean, it's really nice again to have such a really great storyteller trying to make this about the story, make the story the star and not the whole fan service situation. Again, but there was a little bit of a nudge right there from Mothma about somebody who might help, so I wonder who that person may be. I don't know. Would that imply Princess Leia? I don't know. Might be a bit too close. Just might be too early to make any calls like that, or even to be making any calls of such things, because again, this is a show about the story, not the fan service. But again, lots of trickery going on, lots of spy espionage, all the stuff that we love about political thrillers. We're kind of seeing a lot kind of happening in this series, so I'm really enjoying this so far. Yes, today was a bit of a slower episode, so it's not like anything's too flow blown, but you are kind of seeing the chess pieces of where everything's going to be said, and kind of how each character all the big players at least would lead up to kind of the end game of where the show is going to at least take for season 1, and then maybe hopefully develop what is left of season 2 that would, lead up to Rogue One. So that's all I really have to say about this episode. Again, it is a very slow one, but a very crucial one in terms of just setting up the big parts. But let me know what you think. Did you enjoy episode 4 of Andor? How would you compare it to the previous 3? Now that we've seen more characters show up this time around, what do you think? We haven't even talked about Cyrell. Cyrell, I mean, yeah, see a different side of Cyrell that's a bit more, human in a sense, which is really weird when you think about it, because he started off as a series in the first few episodes kind of like the antagonist, and now here we are kind of seeing a side of him that, we didn't expect, especially one where like he comes from just kind of a regular family with a mom and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's going to be a bit of an interesting thing to see moving forward as well. But yeah, let me know what you think about that, as well as, some of the new players that showed up. What do you think that's going to build up to? Are you still tuning into the series, even though it is a much slower show? Do you not like it? Do you dislike it? Do you appreciate more of the grittiness of how this show is approaching itself? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.